Hello, American. When people use short words with you properly, at countries A through Z, they are sensed, including if it is a majority of people's words that are proper, including if it is an entire country together. And that was and is effectively adapted to by a human fact treatment nature breaching method that is and has been attaching everyone to fake conversations through administrations. The World Trade Center had roles with torture and natures of criminally foreign influence private criminal enterprises, overt criminal enterprises at the same time, where and how, too, they have standing positions with different natures of intelligence and their families and conjunctions to them, all natures of conjunctions. The difference of that was is exploited. There are predicate acts with facts methods that are discernible how we have with black people's whites of eyes. Since I was a kid, there are people with the name Leahy and doctors that work at Hartford Hospital and people tied to them have been planting evidences on my street, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, with people increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart. And they forced that and more when I caught them with that. And they hid that by just faking and changing conversations with me. When I caught them over the phone, I didn't get to speak because they know what I caught them doing. They also took my Facebook pages and they made the difference of two. They're guilt with that or they're guilt with making fake Facebook pages pretending to be me. Their roles with the names on the Facebook pages. This Leahy family has little kids in their family. The whole generations of their family are collusions intercities with campuses. Identity theft, fraud, sinners, putting fake transcripts with the FBI directors, plural, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, their family members, people involved with Saudi Arabia that I don't even know their names, but some Mendez police attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed people with the names Scalora and DeMoro and Collo involved with them. Like a Phil Collo was involved with them further with the Bob Chase, too, with Whiting Forensics. Also with others, with digital crimes, with the agencies, and with Facebook, personally and professionally. See, there are a whole bunch of, there are principles with their readings of the law, like, oh, we have the right to lie. They use it where they don't have the right to lie. Then they value, the hierarchy tells them that because that's the hierarchy is criminally foreign influence, though. The difference of them or the other. That's why it's named the difference of guilt at the body dumping spots, the killer, reported killers, the people of their prison, the people that put them away, the state judicial branch and corrections offices are increasingly involved with totally different body dumping spots and murders and untimely deaths years apart. Timed use/S of that collusion/S recorded. They're changing and faking all that's actually recorded on Facebook. And the motivations. They're screening their actual motivations. The Britain Superior Court they have names forging and switching. That's in the Britain, Connecticut. They have a bunch of people with the Wethersfield Judicial Branch up. Whether it's on the Wethersfield Hartford, like half. Wethersfield Judicial Corrections Offices. Also, as organized crime acts and methods, collusion/S, identity theft, fraud, slanders, with people at and next to the or just going by the state judicial branch offices too. The same ones at campuses, intercities, intra-cities. The intelligence, a bunch of intelligence families tied to a Stephen Stockwell have him put me in fake conversations with him. I had only one conversation with him in my life. I said, hello, is Maria there? He hung up and called the police. Now, these police are forging and switching names in Wethersfield. These are people with the state judicial branch offices. Wethersfield Pizza House is right near it. Also, people next to Maria Pizzino might be a Maria Stocco and other boyfriends she had on all sides of Central Connecticut State University, involved with FBI Director Robert Luskin, too. Judges, prosecutors, their kids, pretending passions and emotions, mayors, their kids' conjunctions to them, pretending passions and emotions, faking their motivations for it, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch at the same time, switching names, sequences, putting fake things. They never had integrity. A breaching method showed you guys how to speak about the principles of American history. It measures, maintains self-valued roles, replacing with James Madison, with our founders, with him, had declassified for themselves and for us. They did not have, like, about how they and why they did not have free speech. They had it declassified. Nobody had free speech, not even our founders. And the only one we know the name of is James Madison. And he wanted nothing to do with slavery. Everyone was met. There were internationally monitored conversations just like now that are part of the problem. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, part of the problem. The countries shared, how they are shared individually, grouped, and all humanity voicing through and out systems, tactical terror. From the one that just shows us it's generating totally different species bodies, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies too. So we can see its identity of value progression that is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. We could discern its body to an extent. This is principle with reason and how nature communicates. There's a whole bunch of people tied to a Detective Samuda, involved also with the FBI director and various courts, even Gail King. A whole bunch of people tied to a Gary Sasso is one of the people on the sides of Central Connecticut State University, involved also in New Britain, Connecticut, who's involved also with people from Hartford, Connecticut, on Yale Street. Even if it was real or made up, they're putting fake things in databases and fake motivations. I don't even know the guy on that street. Fake motivations. And Gary Sasso is one of the ones in the records, because that's part of the record, because like this Leahy family with the intelligence community, they have roles with Brian Silver with the Connecticut District Court and with the New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts before and after the World Trade Center attack. All the Hartford courts have intimate ties to Eric Burgess. They recorded. He asked me for help because the intelligence were playing with him on off Central Connecticut State University. I never saw him on that campus in my life. I didn't tell him I was going to help him. I didn't know all the names yet, nor did I tell him how it was tied to confessions with that same spot from people intercities. A Joe DeMore and a Ray Claw were putting fake things in databases with investigators. Also with cousins of theirs, they said his name's Scalora, who are also involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with spots next to the World Trade Center in Manhattan right before the World Trade Center attack, with names on all sides of that case, a case in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. And from inside the court, they put sequence shift changes that actually brought to the court date of the papers. That was in Manhattan, New York. These are people who are intercities and intra-cities, Connecticut. Also next to news locations. WFSB faked conversations with me. And the difference of the intelligence there, or the intelligence families next to them through time since I was a little kid. Those are people in Rocky Hill who have been collusions also with the people next to Fox Connecticut News. And I haven't even tried to call WTNH, trying to warn them ahead of time. It's going to be wire crime acts and methods. You change or fake or hide what I say. Because you guys have sources involved with houses on Church Street in Old Weathersfield. They have rules with wire crimes, federal evidences crimes, rape victims who also have rules with rapes. And this is per their syntax, the people involved, and per their confessions. As the ones increasingly involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, too. He's increasingly involved with people that plant evidences and fake things as collusions. And they want to go before courts that have collusions too. And they don't put anything in writing because they're hiding that. And they have collusions with a whole bunch of other countries. People on Valley Crest Street in Weathersfield and Morgan Circle, named Kerr and DeMorrow. There are increasingly people tied to them, directly and indirectly, also with a former Mayor Gold and a mayor who had a wife or named Ruth, apparently. She's increasingly involved next to the state Department of Education with these people, also with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. And they're not legitimately with foreign and domestic military associated with this DeMorrow family and the Kerr family. And they're educators who have involvements with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. I never had a class with Joe DeMorrow. They try to make a fake exception. And these are people increasingly involved with wire crimes, with Weathersfield police that are refusing to identify themselves. From off campuses, planting predicate acts with facts, methods /S roles, while they are being and have been used remotely, showing how to pretend. They need to pretend their integrity when they are not capable of it. These are people, there are connections between people next to the schools, intercities, people in Hartford, and they're also playing this intercultural game, in other words, and they're using their religious spots. There's a Mike Domain and an Adam Domain. Sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have collusion /S with Jewish-themed people, and with a Catholic and spots and people next to a Catholic St. Anthony's Church. Involved also with some Puerto Rican theme. And I don't know what the Mendez brothers are, but they put me in a fake conversation with the older one at the Weathersfield police station. And I had no conversation with him or anyone else there. And then when I was a kid, they did that too. And then they had to hide that. So they pretended that one of the things, they pretended many things through WFSB. Increasingly, WTNH sources, they have people with the name O'Neill. Sought me and others out, record, confess, demonstrate, confirm, putting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. They're using their little kids for organized crimes. Now, there's an O'Neill family that has the kids that they're a teacher of in West Hartford. They have their little kids and their family members involved with it, with retired police chiefs, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, also with their intimate ties. These are also people hiding their actual motives offensively. Whitey Forensics increasingly has a number of organized crimes associated with people named O'Neill and tied to this O'Neill family, and others involved with a proven child abuser principal of kids, forced, with other families that were involved at the time forcing that, who also had collusions being abused and with abuses of others. And the same names were involved with the elderly homes. There are proofs that they're involved with the veterans' homes too. Ugh, look how they look, just like those buildings behind the people in rap videos. People, little kids from the suburbs, could discern clearer than day. Before America's founders were born, the suburbs were designed way lower than human standards. Not an identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself and to nature even further too. That is proper. Not only is it incapable of causing positive value nature progressions, acts in nature that aren't criminal insidious, this natures of them. In other words, at countries A through Z, the locations, areas, and states still, it's easy to pick out the leaders' insanity because the locations, areas, and states are insane. You guys have been systems tactical terror from the one that has us shown when we are systems tactical terror, from the one that is generating all group differences, otherwise showing us we're using a system other than its own, with negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, including in the form of criminal insidious natures of positive. As a breaching method knew that nature would demonstrate our roles with itself. And it knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate to me humanity. There's a human fact, human nature breaching method. That is one of the things that is inseparable from all these different problems and all these different positives, the real ones and ones that are only criminal and citizen's nature are positive. Just like any place to live. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, with more than 13 states and colonies entrenched. With slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too, because the breaching method demonstrably was using functionally too. How identities of reasons, their voices, their natures would leave out, even though it's about against everyone, how everyone was non-distinctly hurt. They would leave that out. They would force nature's demonstrations of it with subjects treatments. Forced blamed on other things, others ourselves. In other words, we are in a semi-ancient trap that is not generated by and as countries A through Z. It is playing how only the locations, areas, and states could operate the names of countries A through Z. And they do it like it's a person when they speak about it. Oh, the American people, the people of country B, the country C, in other words. And no one ever brings up the breaching method. No one ever brings up how we are an individual species body of a whole bunch of individual bodies generated by that which is showing us. It's generating also totally different species bodies made of a whole bunch of individual bodies to show us what's generating all differences to an extent. To show us that extent comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself and of its relativity / hyperrelativity to a special difference. Appreciated here or as it forced from here, as forced space nature transfer, as nature being a hyper additional word for identity, and as its own, that which is also our own, but our own individually grouped in together as a semi-nature relationship all three ways to its complete identity. But that is greater than us, more finite and with active relativity to us the ways we know, but then hyper additionally. Ways that won't juxtapose. Semi or complete. It has these three identities of relationship to itself, for example. English and other ancient languages were revealed to teach this to be led by the identity the sciences share. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. Its identity shows us that they appear to not share an identity. Like, all the sciences, including them, including anything you guys make up, it is the order of the finite, distinctly from how it is and why it is active and grouped distinctly from the simultaneous. And like with subject treatments, all the parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible, / hyper invisible but still discernible. The parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. Therefore, subjects are about the invisible but still discernible. / hyper invisible but still discernible. How we could discern it is how we could discern. We could only appreciate subjects individually and or finite, grouped and or active, and progressive and or simultaneously to an extent. But with our discernment and appreciation of how that is actually, we could discern that there is what is greater than, more finite than. Also has active relativity in ways further distinct, while those are its ways too. It is distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. It's perfect value progression. Here, or our value is forced from here. It uses nature's identity, uses has a special difference manifest the way it is. See, we appreciated this honesty, nature of honesty, or integrity, rather. We're even. In other words, that we wouldn't have left out Native American rights and needs, not let alone our own, to not have the ground below our feet, the waters, the means to have the might of the rest of the species bodies, not having to go. It's important to do things safe and everything. So especially everyone's on the same thing. In other words, but we're not on the same thing unless we're doing it through filters that are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw / hypercriminally foreign influence. And they're criminally foreign influence in such a way to keep the hypercriminally foreign influence left out. Keep even the real motivations it needs to have there. That's why they have their kids involved. This Leahy family faked conversations with me through the mail to other people. I can't get anyone from Hartford Hospital to respond. They have it since my father died. They have rules too, where people have home break-ins on my street, in my area, in my house. Collusion with this, directly and indirectly with this Leahy family. And one's involved with him, personally and professionally, with judges, prosecutors, their kids, victims, advocates, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They have rules with a number of different murders, body dumping spots, and untimely deaths. Even if any or all that, if all of it was made up, the show itself too. Because I only know them seeking me out with people I don't even know other names that sought me out from other areas. A Fred Grisey, a Kevin Harris, are two of the ones that Rick Sanfaglione sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They had different teachers than me in my grammar school, and they're putting fake things in the databases, attaching me to fake locations, fake ties, fake natures of ties to strangers and to themselves, with intelligence families that grew up near me, ones that aren't even here anymore. I don't know where they are. And people associate with them. In other words, people just repeat other people's conversations, but the whole thing's fake. There's a lot of people incapable of dealing properly with words like predicate acts. I'm not even a lawyer. Lawyers originally and still, all sides of criminal and civil cases, lawyers like a Trantola is involved with offensively making sure mandated laws not followed properly. And they have rules of wire crime acts and methods with WFSB that attach me to fake conversations with them. Also more with retired police chiefs, with sexual medical offenders of kids. And people like this Trantola, preventing people short words. And then they bring up all kinds of stuff, and then they pretend they don't speak clear. These are all kinds of natures of organized crime, criminally foreign influences / hypercriminally foreign influence. Whole bunch of countries at the same time involved with these names and the locations associated with them, including more World Trade Center predicate acts. The Wethersfield police confessed the name Scalora is involved with them with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, falsified police reports, interbranch forging and switching names, digital crimes still with whiting forensics, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids. People named Scalora also involved interstates and internationally with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Get them off the fake ties, fake natures of ties to me in sequence shifts. They're increasingly involved with people that hid from my parents what I recorded them doing. With people I didn't even know from on the sides of the schools that didn't even go to my school, planting evidences. Increasingly, those people have roles with Hartford Hospital next to campuses, planting evidences, fake identity theft, acting so others could take a picture and make a fake exception on people knowing each other, etc. As people completely do too, like with the Joshua Julian, involved with the same house /S, and retired police chiefs, increasingly a police chief Cintron, and people associated with him are recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have Elm Streets and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, and people associated with it and conjunctive to it. involved with the state judicial branch and corrections offices, also having people act and as relative to their roles, sticking predicate acts with facts, fake transcripts and databases through the mail crime, wire crime methods, include to cover that up too. Like with the news locations, the difference of the guilt of the intelligence there or the intelligence next to them. Mark Violet is one of the ones that sought me out as a stranger, also with Justin Kovinskis, from people from other areas, tied to the people I never in my age that I never had classes with, tied to them, planting fake ties like made people look like they're a group that wasn't at all. These are increasingly people from Yukon, involved with the drugs and medicines and the unmarked police forms, foreign and domestic intelligence, involved with the Collo family, the Scalora family, the Morrow family, involved actually with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first forest, and they're educators. A bunch of kids and adults from Central Connecticut State University were court expressed, demonstrated, confirmed. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Demoro and Pandolf and Scalora have collusion /S with predicate acts in my street with multiple police departments with the same house /S with wire crimes, falsified police reports. They're switching and forging names they won't get on paper since I was a kid. Intercities, they're doing this. Interstates, cities, inter and intra campuses, this is recorded. Others recorded. They have readings of statutes and precedents regarding Facebook or regarding what's the law regarding what's said online. They're leaving out exceptions and exception nature. A breaching method already showed them. They need to hide the actual value of their subject treatments here. These are a certain type of victim / hyper victim, victim predator, hyper predator, specifically to keep as tools by the hyper foreign to keep them blaming other things, others, ourselves. For nature's increasing demonstrations of a human fact treatment nature breaching method involved here. Worse than criminal incompetence and delusions regarding the subject treatments, regarding the impositions on people of the suburbs that were designed before our founders were born, and with slavery entrenched northern, southern, let alone the city, New York City. It's not even, in other words, the cities across the world, the country. Really, why and how? The exceptions, all exception nature. This breaching method consciously knew and understood ahead of time that it would be a getting over on exception nature, because nature communicates this way. In other words, by that one identity that is all things except for where it is not, by any way. And how? In other words, in many vaccines, but now because there is a hyper unnatural. There's what is only natural as criminal foreign influences / hyper-criminal foreign influence associated with the fact-treating nature, quality aspects, and nature of the leaders' voices. So they bring up words like genocide and world court, but they don't bring up how individually grouped and together the voices speaking for the principles of the names of the people, the signs, and therefore of the law. They have no job. They had integrity. They hadn't come through criminally foreign influence, hyper-criminally foreign influence campuses. They would have realized that how we have black pupils and whites of eyes is inseparable from how a breaching method reassigned nature's communications with it, when nature is not only its nature as criminal insidiousness nature. Our founders left this declassified for us to understand why and how they did not have free speech. Because worse than just, but also because internationally monitored conversations had even slavery against our black pupils, whites of eyes communications, and roles and needs and natures to pretend other or otherwise to be sensed, including if as a majority of people, including if as everyone, and that adapted to. Right? We had more than 13 colonies entrenched. James Madison's plan and founders behind it enabled George Washington to agree to help them and to use that plan. We're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, or would have brought up how the plan was to counter extort key people at key locations and force them to break the internationally monitored conversations rules. And the overt criminal enterprises rules, private ones, and the people and the sense and sensibilities and the rules of the people inside that. Because it was a terror method on every individual difference. There was no one was free since some ancient times, from off the campuses of this ancient republic. It's still criminally foreign influence in some ancient times. And nature demonstrates it is being used for systems tactical ulterior from the one that uses to communicate with us about difference. It uses how its own hyperdifference is inseparable from all their differences, even from art, the way it's volume science, being the order of the finite, or the value of the, or the finite detail. /S being the group details, or active, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, /hypersimultaneously, being the value of the simultaneous. Everything's about the hypersimultaneous. So there are logistical security. In other words, they start speaking about weapons. They want to have a nature debate. You guys are leaving out how there are collusions with all these countries here that can be discerned. You guys pretend it's just debatable because it's bad. It should be brought before court. The court's already collusion. The state judicial branch office, corrections offices are increasingly involved with New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut's District Court before and after the World Trade Center attack, with a Dean Judd and his family, and with foreign and domestic military involved with intercities, intra-cities, also with people on my street, and where they moved from since before they moved on the street when I was in fourth grade. And they had a kid that moved into my fourth grade class. No, as one of the ones involved with multiple police departments and police forums and courts, planting fake transcripts, and private criminal enterprises or work criminal enterprises at the same time. In other words, people associated with body dumping spots. These are people that plant evidence on corners of the streets of the school of one of the child abusers, leaders of kids, involved with the syntax and people associated with them, with multiple of them. And educators are increasingly involved. That's why you need to get things on paper, too. So you have overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and the interbranch and foreign, a whole bunch of different countries with the campuses in the same house /S on my street, intercities, with the people planting evidences tied to them. That's what's actually recorded. So please, someone tell Judge Napolitano they've been changing and faking what was digitally communicated to him. In other words, have WFSB get me out the fake conversations with them. It's increasingly people next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants and their family members, and their educators, have roles of all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and like timed acting so someone could take a picture and pretend that even people had words that never even spoke. They just take a picture of someone and pretend they spoke. Way worse. And this is through multiple cases. The breaching method uses them all names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch and the intelligence names self-valuing the same sequence shifts, the same criminally foreign influence subject treatments, incapable of dealing with exceptions and exception nature properly. They're planting their collusion /s with predicate acts with facts methods where they're putting fake exceptions at crime scenes and increasing that collusion /s with the original hypercrime scene, criminally foreign influence use of all locations /s. So we're not gonna leave black people's white survivors in the predicate acts with facts method associated with the names and the natures who would even have the audacity to pretend that we can't see right through them with science when they pretend that they don't understand what causes the negative outer nature progressions, acts, and natures in suburbs, let alone in cities. And note how Hartford is self-described as suburban / urban. And note its roles with the Harry Beecher Stowe House and Mark Twain House. And in other words, the names of the people of the sciences have criminally foreign influence back treatment nature quality aspects in nature, for example. The names of the people of American history have self-valued roles, replacing with James Madison and our founders, plural, had to classify for himself and for themselves. Like why and how he's the only one that had security to let us know the name of. And because they were all using his plan. Again, to counter-extort the rest of the founders, everyone. But they could only do it to an extent. They declassified why and how. They didn't have free speech and means to get the breaching method, like its rules sickly distinctly with slavery, sickly distinctly hurting black pupils, whites of eyes, in the words, nature's communication system, sickly distinctly against each Native American tribe. But see, there were Native Americans are part of that plural. President / chief shows us this. But you have to have James Madison put in context to correlate it and have nature debate on it proper. See, but the names of the people of the sciences, the names of the people of American history has self-valued roles of the breaching method that shows them how to appreciate principles, treatments with principles of reality and with American history and how to have a nature debate to get away with that and to appear to be integrity anyway. This is why and how no one has used how we have black people's whites of eyes means to discern. So the victim predators, hyper predators, only allowed to be heard speaking and blaming other things, others or self. Right, where, and how. So they have replaced right from the communications of James Madison about how a human fact treatment nature breaching method had been entrenched. And there had been sustained roles with it and roles with checking to make sure there were roles with it, which it was an extent of collusion / S. Every single person against themselves and other people in nature itself, syntactically. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including if it was a majority of people, including if it's everyone. To understand how the breaching method could do this, we have to pay attention to where and how. We know to an extent in semi-ancient times, before religious messengers were born, already there are proofs from off the campuses became criminally foreign influence uses of the voices there. Forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to abridge the syntax of nature's communications to us. And as well as us, but not by any way. Here, as only increasing value here, or as if our value forced from here. Not as death, but as forced space nature transfer, as our part of ourself / S, as itself, as its identity of value / value progression, making more and more of its identity of forever nature through temporary / lasting space nature. This is what English was revealed to teach and to be led by. And so valuing exceptions and exception nature. The Republic for itself, its campuses system / S, and its pantheism together serve the function as per science, no faith, to see through isms, even its own, to be and to stay being led by that which is hyper invisible, but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible, but still discernible. Again, such as the parts of speech. Free speech. So WFSB fake conversations with me and Interbranch, which won't get on paper because on a mass scale they put cover-ups of their collusions with fake transcripts there. Is it being worse to the difference of guilt there, or at campuses with databases, or at private companies with databases where they live, corners of streets near other people, increasingly people with the name Oliveri and Joshua Stryker have collusions with people from like that went to my grammar school. I never saw them on my grammar school in my life. In other words, they weren't even my. In other words, they made one class. I had Eric Oliveri in with me. And increasingly, there's a bunch of people tied to like how they had marketplaces back then, like with the stock market, in their syntax, in their confessions, in their roles plans with the people and their names, increasingly tied to body dumping spots, timing where I was going to be, put fake ties, make fake exception of knowing me, and being incapable of being honest about that. The FBI even include and courts. There are proofs that they lied to that teacher about me, to have him repeat it behind my back because they keep conversations where no one's going to be getting that we never were. In other words, and they're just having put fake things. Increasingly, those are people from other areas who have roles of predicate acts in my street. And with the name /S intercities involved with multiple police departments at the same time who brought their involvements with this and with different instances that have connections. So we need to get them on paper, one name in sequence. Get me off of fake conversations. And about the World Trade Center attack, no. And I'm one of the people that was next to the World Trade Center towers right before the attack, including in the court next to it. I could show how recorded names on all sides of that case and the court itself. They put a sequence shifts from inside the Ninth Circuit Court right before the World Trade Center attack. Someone from inside the court had affected legally stored their papers, and the timestamp that they were that was originally on them, they insidiously changed that and put them back there, post dated, to make them look as if they had been handed into the Ninth Circuit late, right before the World Trade Center attack. And then the World Trade Center, but that was proven after. That led up to a 2006 district court case, but now no longer in the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan. It was in a court in New Haven. But it's a bunch of Connecticut courts and the state judicial branch offices, corrections offices, and their family members and intimate ties and their campuses. Roles with also the whole bunch of different countries with differences brackets, with principles treatments that are being and haven't been used remotely, criminally for influence, tactically, delusions, raw, and needing them to pretend other as styles, needs, natures of logic. You guys can't afford to have people short words proper regarding the World Trade Center predicate acts of WFSB. Get me off the fake conversations with them and get them onto paper, the interbranch, include a bunch of people in the Brit Superior Court, Harvard Court, and the Connecticut's District Court. They colluded with the FBI director, his co-defendants, and their family members. Names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, depositions, inter and intra cities of Connecticut before the World Trade Center attack, as the ones that were involved with Washington D.C. and New York too, and Connecticut and other states and cities of Connecticut, with the ones also with the other countries, including Saudis, increasingly involved with WFSB. The difference of WFSB's guilt, a whole bunch of different countries involved with WFSB. and former police chiefs from Wethersfield involved with a bunch of people with the corners of that street through time. In other words, like a cousin, in other words, get them on paper, one name in sequence. These are increasingly people like this Bill Collusion, further involved with the Bob Chase and with these Mendez brothers, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, with the campuses and with their differences, including their cultural, their religious, their uses of people's names, the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. And they have something to do with so they're just using their differences. And so they blame it on this. It's all real. All those sides are criminally sick. The ones who speak for religion. How could they speak for religion and have black people's the rights of ours left out? Because they're little tools. Follow mandated law. Fix the World Trade Center predicate acts and stop pretending fake documents. They go back and forth with their opinions on documents with the intelligence communities and the interbranch. They show them the right to, they use the right to lie where they don't. They just keep everyone, defending styles the way the breaching method showed themselves they have to do that. In other words, show the people that know the most about the law, even Judge Napolitano. Logic, nature used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. I should have like that the answer to the names of the interbranch switching and forging names. Joe DeMoro is one of the ones involved. He has federal evidence of his crimes. He was been planting evidences and hiding things from intelligence people associated with him with the state, the Wethersfield Community Center, and the Wethersfield Police Department, where it was people associated where it was then and where it is now, are increasingly involved with a DeMoro family, also with the sides of other campuses in intercities, including Hartford Hospital. And they're increasingly involved with, like it's John DeMoro, with some rape confessions. I didn't even think it was real. But then it was brought up, and there were other girls involved with that, and then they get mad. No, they had roles with the wire crimes, messing with other natures of federal crimes. In other words, and pretending to know people at a corner of a building, like them, in other words, this is with the people tied to the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with houses on the corners of the street, on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, are increasingly people involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, with judges and prosecutors, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people involved with these rapes. And this conversation with the Wethersfield police tied to these Mendez police, making conversations with me at the Wethersfield Police Department. The Britain Superior Court also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have them involved with some sexual medical offenders of kids with New Britain Superior Court through time. They're increasingly involved with multiple FBI directors. They go back and forth regarding documents and files. Those files are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. A whole bunch of people tied to Rick Sam Baglione with a Fred Grisey and with this Leahy family, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, identity theft, fraud, standards, criminally foreign influence, uses of investigators. Kevin Harris too had roles with involving with organized crimes. The daughter of a principal when I went to that grammar school. I never had a word of conversation with Kevin Harris. They tried to make a fake ties to me, made up whole stories and had acting tied to it at Quinnipiac University. Rick C. and Faglione recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he had been influenced to do the same thing and spread lies with people with the name Leahy that work at Hartford Hospital with the mental health care side. A whole bunch of men and women in their family and their kids. They have their little daughter on Facebook involved with organized crimes with them and with sexual and medical offenders of kids, a principal child abusers, leader of kids. The Leahy family has their daughter involved with that, putting fake motives too. A bunch of judges, a Judge Killian, a Judge Smith, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids years apart, digital crimes and wedding forensics. They're changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. You get them onto paper. Get them onto paper. It's more.